Planes were positioned. Ships were already in place. Targets had been hit. And then, right at the edge, Donald Trump stopped it. No dramatic address, no victory speech, just one line. The second wave of attacks on Venezuela was canceled. Here's the uncomfortable truth. This decision had very little to do with peace and almost everything to do with money, leverage, and timing. If you want to understand how modern power really works, this moment matters more than most people realize. Because Venezuela isn't just another country on the map. It sits on the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Iran. Buried underground is a resource that fuels cars, factories, militaries, and entire financial systems. So when the United States moves against Venezuela, markets don't wait. Oil traders react instantly, currencies shift, governments quietly recalculate alliances. And then Trump pulled back. That pause tells us more than the attack itself ever could. Let's rewind. Venezuela had been collapsing for years. Hyperinflation erased savings almost overnight. The currency became nearly worthless. Oil production, once the backbone of the nation, collapsed under mismanagement, sanctions, and years of underinvestment. At the same time, Venezuela became politically isolated, sanctioned by the United States, backed by rivals like Russia and China. Weak, but not irrelevant. Then came the attack. U.S. forces struck Venezuelan targets. The leadership was shaken. The message was unmistakable. Escalation was on the table. In military logic, this is the most dangerous moment. If you strike once and stop, you look unsure. If you strike again, you take control. Everyone expected the second option. Analysts talked about full-scale intervention. Markets priced in instability. Oil prices twitched, then froze. And then Trump stopped. Officially, the reason was cooperation. Venezuela released political prisoners. Signals of dialogue appeared. That sounds reasonable until you think about it. Major wars are not canceled because of gestures. They're canceled because the math changes, and that math lives in oil, finance, and control. Here's where the story gets interesting. Oil isn't just a commodity, it's a financial system. Most global oil trade happens in US dollars. That creates constant global demand for the dollar, even when the United States runs massive deficits. This system only works if major oil flows stay within friendly or controllable networks. Venezuela's oil had been locked away. Sanctions froze exports. Infrastructure decayed. Production collapsed. But beneath that chaos was an opportunity. If Venezuela opened up, not politically, but economically, American and allied oil companies could step in, not with tanks, but with contracts, not with bombs, but with capital. And capital is quieter than war. It doesn't dominate headlines the same way, but it reshapes countries just as effectively. Here's the uncomfortable part. A second wave of attacks would have destroyed oil infrastructure, ports, refineries, pipelines. That kind of damage delays production for years. Delay means lost money, lost leverage, lost strategic advantage. At the same time, negotiations were suddenly possible. Oil executives were talking. Investment figures, tens of billions of dollars, were being discussed behind closed doors. When that happens, war becomes inefficient. Trump has always understood leverage better than ideology. First pressure, second fear, third negotiation. The first strike created leverage. The pause preserved the prize. This is where hype and reality split. The hype says the U.S. showed restraint. The reality is the U.S. changed tactics. Military force opened the door. Economic power was meant to walk through it. And notice something subtle. U.S. forces didn't fully withdraw. Naval assets stayed nearby. The threat didn't disappear. It just went quiet. That silence is strategic. It says cooperate and pressure stays low. Resist and it returns instantly. This is modern conflict. Less invasion, more negotiation under threat. Now zoom out. If the U.S. gains influence over Venezuelan oil without full-scale war, several things happen.
Global oil supply becomes more predictable. Dollar-based oil trade strengthens. Rival powers lose leverage in the Western Hemisphere. Energy markets stabilize on American terms. From the outside, it looks like de-escalation. From the inside, it's consolidation. There's an irony here. Canceling an attack can look like weakness, but in finance-driven geopolitics, it often signals confidence. If you can pause and still control the board, you're not losing power, you're exercising it. And this brings us to the part most people miss. Wars used to be loud, declared, televised. Now they're often silent. They happen through debt, contracts, sanctions, and investment flows. No victory speeches, no surrender ceremonies, just balance sheets slowly shifting. So when Trump stopped the attack, the real question wasn't why show mercy, it was what became more valuable than war. And the answer points straight back to oil, money, and control without occupation. Because occupation is expensive, it creates resistance, it attracts scrutiny. Economic influence is cheaper, cleaner, harder to fight. Which leaves us with a troubling thought. If wars can be paused not because peace is achieved, but because better deals are available, then what does conflict look like in the future? Fewer bombs, more boardrooms, less noise, more leverage. Trump didn't just stop an attack, he revealed how modern power prefers to operate, quietly, calculating, and always with the math in mind. So the unresolved question isn't whether the attack should have happened, it's this. In a world where wars can be replaced by financial control, who really decides when violence ends, and who pays the price when it doesn't?